My talk this morning is called "A Funny Thing Happened on My Way to Disprove God." I grew up in a ghetto in Brooklyn, New York. Did you ever think that God was ignoring you? Did you ever think that maybe God wasn't ignoring you, but you weren't listening? There was a story I read about of a man would go to church every Sunday with his wife. And as soon as the minister would start to speak, he'd fall asleep. Well, one Sunday he's there with his wife. The minister starts to speak, he falls asleep. When he wakes up, he sees his wife going down the aisle. So he gets up and he follows her down the aisle. When the wife sees him, she goes, "Go back to your seat. I'll tell you later." It seems that the minister had asked all the women front for special blessing. Yes, maybe God is speaking. Maybe you're not listening. You know, going to Sunday school every year, it's still very hard sometimes to awaken to spiritual things when you live in an inner city ghetto. So even though I went to religious school for 8 years, I was more like the little boy who came home from Sunday school. And the mom said, "So what you learned today?" And the little boy said, "Well, we learned about Moses and how he took the slaves out of Egypt. They came to a big river, built a big bridge, and went into the promised land." And the mom said, "Are you sure that's the way the teacher told the story?" And the little boy said, "Well, if I told you what the teacher said, you'd never believe it." So I was like that little boy. I heard these stories, but I had trouble believing. So by the time I reached age 20, I used to call myself an advanced atheist. Now, what's an advanced atheist? That's a person who thinks he doesn't believe in God. But he also wants to argue with everybody who says that they do. Well, fortunately for me, God had plans for me. And on one cold November evening in 1967, I got on my motorcycle for my 30-minute ride home from Brooklyn College. 5 minutes from my parents' house, all of a sudden there was a steel wall right in front of me on the highway. And before I could avoid it, I crashed into a disabled trailer truck that had been abandoned on the highway with no lights on. Now, I didn't black out and go into a tunnel and see the light. Instead, I found myself in the street, bleeding profusely, and in a lot of pain. Strangely enough, I didn't have any fear at the time. All I could think is, my life is meaningless. Let's just get it over with. I think that's when Spirit looked down and said, "I think we need to teach the boy what it's all about." So an ambulance came an hour later, picked me up, took me to a big city emergency room. I lay on a gurney for another 3 hours until they were ready to see me. Finally, the doctors came in, did some suturing of the deep cuts, ran some tests. And then at 3 a.m. in the morning, they came back into the room and said, "We don't understand it, but all the bleeding has stopped. You don't have any major injuries. Here's a pair of crutches. You can go." So as I limped out of the hospital, I said, things are going to be different. I felt like my life had been given back to me. And I thought nothing was ever going to be the same again. Now, in the emergency room, the doctor said I'd never be able to run again. I was the captain of the Brooklyn College track team. I didn't believe it. I decided I didn't want to live in New York anymore. So I wrote away for a track scholarship, even though they said I'd never run again. Now, I was accepted in Florida, and I was accepted in Louisiana. I had a lot of relatives in Florida. I had none in Louisiana. I knew that I wanted to be on my own. I didn't want family looking over my shoulder telling me what to do, what not to do. Now, when I got there, I was limping, and the track coach looked at me and said, "Well, what's this?" I said, "Not to worry." For some reason, I had absolute faith that I was going to heal completely. Well, within 3 months of getting there, I was running as fast as I did before the accident. Well, 6 months later, I was talked into entering a weightlifting contest, at which time I hurt my low back. That injury persisted for the next 3 years, right into graduate school. Finally, a chiropractor helped. I was so impressed, I decided to become a chiropractor. Off to Davenport, Iowa, I go, still calling myself the advanced atheist. One day a classmate tells me he's going to go to a workshop to hear a clairvoyant speak. So what did I say? I said, if you're that gullible, I better go with you to protect you. Because I thought that was just nonsense. Well, instead of protecting my friend, I started sensing something which I couldn't explain. So for the next 3 years, I kept on looking for answers. How is this possible? I didn't even believe in it. And finally, in 1975, I picked up a book which changed my life. That book became my Damascus Road experience. The book was the biography of Edgar Cayce, There Is a River. I was so impressed by that book that even though I was brought up in a Jewish family, I was calling myself an advanced atheist. I finished reading the book and went out and joined the Southern Baptist Sunday School. I didn't join the church, I joined the Sunday school. I knew I needed to study the New Testament. I had been brought up with the Old Testament. Now, Cayce had mentioned that dreams can be a pathway to your higher self. Well, I've been having dreams all my life, never knew they had any meaning. All of a sudden, I had a reason to study my dreams. Since June of 1975, I've recorded over 18,000 of my own dreams. Now, these have given me information in almost every area of my life: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, healing. Now, one of the first dreams that told me something very specific was a dream that told me to write an article on cancer. Well, I woke up and I said, I'm not going to write that. I said, I'm a chiropractor. I'm going to read an article on cancer written by a chiropractor. Well, for 3 weeks, my conscience wouldn't leave me alone. And finally, I said, okay, I'll write it. No one's going to print it. But I sent it into the newspaper as an editorial, and they wrote it. So anytime you have a major question in your life that you're not sure of the answer, the guidance is write your question down on a pad by your bedside. Before you go to sleep, pray for guidance. So I wrote, should I write any more articles? A few weeks later, I had my answer in a dream. In the dream, I was a gunfighter back in the Old West. And in this gun battle, my opponent reached for his holsters to draw his 6 guns. I reached for my holsters, drew out 2 pencils, and shot him. I knew that the power of the lead of my pencils was more powerful than the lead of his 6 guns, so I kept on writing. Ended up writing another 20 articles for newspapers and journals, and eventually my dream book, He Who Walks on 2 Worlds. But just like that, dreams have given me insights into so many different areas of my life. Another question I had was, where should I set up my clinic? There was a lot of big holistic centers in California, so I wrote it out on my pad, where should I set up my clinic? I had some dreams which gave me some insights. In one of them, I was a little baby in a crib. I was about 1 inch big, so I was really tiny. In another crib, there was a big baby running around the crib, and a voice said, he's bigger so he can move. When you two are bigger, you too can move. I knew the dream was telling me I had things to learn right there in Monroe, Louisiana, and that when the time was right, I would be led forth. Another dream said the reason you've been led to Monroe, Louisiana is that the sparse social activity will be helpful for your growth. Similar to being in a monastery. That was a dream that gave me some really good guidance. I knew I needed to stay in that clinic until I was told otherwise. Now, I was a competitive bodybuilder back in the 1970s. I was so headstrong with my workouts. I used to train 7 days a week, twice a day. I even used to make the comment that if work got in the way of my workouts, I'd have to get rid of work. Well, fortunately for me, I placed 4th in Mr. Louisiana in 1979 on a day when I shouldn't have. There were 4 men in the audience who could have beaten me that day who didn't want to compete that day. So I took the trophy and I said, God, thank you for this trophy. It's enough. I cut my workouts back. I stopped competing, and now I just do it for fun and for health. A few weeks after that, I had a dream in which a teacher said, now that you have put competition behind you, we can get on and do some important work with your life. The healing started the following year. See, sometimes we hold on to certain things in our life so tightly that we prevent ourselves from receiving our highest spiritual good. And this is something everybody should ask themselves. Is there something I'm holding on to so tightly that is preventing me from receiving my highest spiritual good. Now, do you believe you are a unique creation of God? Do you believe you came here on a mission? I believe those things. And because I do believe those things, after my busiest year as a chiropractor, I decided God didn't want me to keep this gift of spiritual healing a secret anymore. I gave away the clinic and started traveling and lecturing and doing the healing. Now, it's interesting that my first major spiritual dream, I was embarrassed to record it. This is quite unusual because I've had numerous triple X rated dreams. Spiritual dream, I was embarrassed. People would say, well, wait a second, how can you be embarrassed by a spiritual dream? Well, I'm the youngest of 6. My oldest brother's an accountant. The next brother's a physicist. My sister's a nurse. The next brother's a chiropractor who followed me at the chiropractor. And the next brother's a psychologist. In the dream, a spiritual teacher comes to me and says, do you want to come with me on the spiritual path? Or do you want to go with these doctors on the path of great wealth? And my mind went, money. And I said, no, I want to go with you. And as soon as I said that, they took me into a new room and started pulling out a second skin. And it started hurting. And I said, stop it, you're hurting me. They went, They just kept on pulling out the new skin until it completely covered my entire body. I then found myself back at my parents' house in Brooklyn. And I said, why are they looking at me the same way? Can't they see that I've been changed? But the voice said, no, they can't tell. The new skin fits perfectly over the old. So people would say, well, why would you be embarrassed by that dream? Well, I was embarrassed by the dream because I thought that somehow someone in the family would find out that I would choose spirit over wealth. I found that very threatening at the time. The more I thought about the dream, I said, no, that's not a bad dream. My family already thinks I'm a little bit weird. I think if you walk, you talk, people will come to accept you for who you are. Also, if you remember in Matthew 6:33, Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Jesus didn't say forget about money. He said choose God first. Then everything else will be given to you. Now, my first major dream on spiritual healing occurred in 1981 after my first visit to the Findhorn Foundation in Northern Scotland. I had a dream that I was in a church. I came out of the church and there was a gate with a lock on it. And I said, okay, lock. I made the sign of the cross and said, in the name of the Christ. And the lock opened. And then a voice said, look at that, we have Christ in our midst. And I said, no, I'm no one. I'm here to help him manifest the Christ. I thought it was a great dream, but I didn't know what to do with it. A few months later, I'm at an ARE conference in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're discussing dreams. I mentioned this dream, and a woman says, well, you're a chiropractor. Why don't you make the sign of the cross over someone's spine and see what will happen? So what did I say? Well, nothing's going to happen. It's just a dream. She said, humor me. Well, 95 out of 100 people, when their spine has misalignment, they lay down with their shoes on, one leg is going to be shorter. 95 out of 100 people when the chiropractor aligns their spine, usually the legs even out. So I checked the person's spine, checked their leg length, stepped a few feet away, made the sign of the cross and said, in the name of the Christ, and their spine leaped into place as their legs evened out. Needless to say, that got my attention. So even if you've been trained as a physician, you see something happen, you realize you didn't do it. That's a way of getting your attention. Now, if it was just the spine I was seeing respond to spiritual healing, I might have theorized maybe I was influencing it somehow because I was trained as a chiropractor. But it wasn't just the spine, it was all kinds of things. I was very glad when I spoke at the big Unity Church in Atlanta that an oncologist referred one of his patients to me, because it's been very difficult to get documentations from medical doctors. Well, this lady had a massive tumor in her uterus. She came to see me, I worked on her. 6 weeks later, she went back to the same oncologist, and then she called me to let me know the tumor was completely gone. Another case that we had great documentation was at University of Key West, Florida. A lady had AIDS with a T cell count of 350. 2 days after a healing session, she went and had a blood work recheck. It was 770, back in the normal range. She said, if this can help your work, here's the documentation. Probably, though, from my most dramatic case as a doctor was a lady down in Fort Myers, Florida, who was in a wheelchair with metal clamps on her legs, but she had degenerative disc disease. She brought me her lateral lumbar x-rays, which showed no disc spacing in the low back, so the vertebrae were crushing the nerves going down the legs. Well, I was visiting that day. She asked for some healing. She started feeling so much better, she had her low back re-x-rayed a month later and brought me the new x-rays. The new x-rays showed discs spacing in the low back. Within 6 months, she was back at work as a nurse. It was a 99% recovery. That's not supposed to happen. Bones are fully ossified at age 25. Or we're seeing a dog so arthritic that he was carried into the church because anytime he did a movement, he would yelp with pain. And they called me the next day to say he's running around the yard with no symptoms. Or to have 2 senior citizens over 80 call because they had extremely high blood pressure, did the healing over the phone. Then they got back to me that their blood pressure was the lowest it had been in many, many years, and their MD even said to them, whatever you're doing, keep it up. So that was neat. But it's not just physical things. You know, in Matthew 11:28, Jesus said, come to me, all you who labor and carry burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and meek in my heart. You will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is pleasant and my burden is light. So I think Jesus was saying, look, anywhere in your life that you're stuck, come to God and ask for help. It can be, physical, it can be emotional, mental. When I spoke at the big Uni Church in Naples, Florida, a man came to me the day after I worked on his wife, and he said to me, what did you do to my wife yesterday? And I go, what do you mean? And he said, well, for many years she had so much anger at her mother, she used to say if I ever mentioned her mother, she would divorce me. You come and work on her, she comes home and starts speaking about her mother. Then he started smiling and said, whatever you gave her, I want some of it. It's seeing relationship healed. At Uni of Bellevue in Washington State, a lady came and asked for relationship healing between her and her husband. I said, I can't work on him without his permission, but I can do a relationship healing from your point of view. The next morning, she called the church. She was very emotional, and she was crying. She said, last night, my husband helped me for the first time in about 20 years. She said, how was it possible? And I said, with the healing, you became a new person. As you became a new person, you gave off a new vibration. He thereby reacted differently. Now, sometimes people ask things of me that I don't think can be done. So the first time I had Reverend Grace Merritt call from Unity of Dallas and ask for financial healing for the church. And I said, can we do that? She said, well, you're not doing it, God's doing it. And I said, right. So I had to give myself a mental smack. I said, okay, get clear, get clear, get clear. I said, can we do that? Got a yes. Gave her a financial healing for the church. She called back a few days later. She said, you know what? The bookkeeper came in, checked the books, and found $800 they'd overlooked. Instant manifestation. I was speaking at a small Uni church in South Carolina, and the minister from the audience said, we could use some of that. I said, you want it? You got it. That night we were having dinner together. She said, you know what? Someone put a check for $1,000 in the donation plate. And it's a very, very small church there in Columbia, South Carolina. So all these amazing things, physical, emotional, mental. I get a lot of great emails and letters from people. This lady sent me this thing, said, Doc Shaye, I don't know where to begin, but I had a miracle yesterday from God. I'm so grateful, words can't express my feelings. I want to thank you for dedicating your life to God and being a conduit for these healings. I spoke to you about a week ago about the surgery I was scheduled to undergo for a lumpectomy on my left breast. I had ultrasound proof of the lump and was having it removed. I went into the hospital yesterday and was hooked up to the IV. I was undergoing a procedure where an ultrasound, the doctor places a needle and wire into the tumor so the surgeon can locate it easily to be removed. I was having the test, but the technician was trying to locate the tumor and couldn't find it. She referred to the previous films, and it was clearly observable. They became embarrassed. They called in the doctor. They went back several times. Finally, they said, look, this is state-of-the-art equipment. We are good at what we do, but this tumor is gone. I then told them about having a healing with you, and they said, well, we don't believe in that stuff. But just in case, give us his number. Well, I've been the recipient of an incredible gift, and it's my responsibility to tell everyone about it, no matter what their response. Thank you so much. So all these amazing things, physical, emotional, mental, career, finances, pets, what's the purpose of spiritual healing? In John 9:1, there's a story that as Jesus passed by, his disciples saw a man blind from birth. And they said, Master, who did sin? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus has answered, neither, but to give glory to God. Yes, sometimes the answer to spiritual healing is just that simple, to give glory to God. Yes, a funny thing happened on my way to disprove God. I didn't disprove God. I found God.